as the NBA regular season is coming to an end at the end of this week, we're already heading into the offseason with already one team in my Chicago Bulls completely resetting their front office. We're going to talk a little bit about that in the upcoming coaching carousel. We're going to start with the Giannis situation in Milwaukee, and apparently it's starting to get toxic. We're going to talk about it all and more right after this.
Welcome to the number one place for your daily basketball news and analysis, NBA Central.
What's going on, basketball fans? Welcome to another episode of NBA Central, your number one spot for everything basketball related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at NBA Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today, y'all. We're going to start off with this. The Giannis Antetokounmpo situation is apparently turning toxic for Giannis and Milwaukee, and apparently he is pushing for a trade hard behind the scenes, and the relation with the Bucks is starting to break down. This shouldn't be a huge surprise to people. I think we kind of understood that Giannis just didn't want the appearance of asking for a trade, but basically wanting that. As right now we're saying, reported by ESPN that a source close to the team said this is as toxic of a team situation as any in the league. They waited until the very end on Giannis, and now everyone knows. That is already an interesting situation. Now, you guys, if many people who've been watching this channel for a while, especially this season, I've been saying the Bucks should have traded Giannis Antetokounmpo. It just the runway for them to try to compete with Giannis just never really seemed like it was going to materialize. They tried with Dame, they tried with Miles Turner. I personally would have moved him at the trade deadline, and that's not even in hindsight. You can go back. I've been saying this for a while, right? But with Giannis now, having the issue of him being shut down, with the Milwaukee Bucks focusing on their draft position by shutting him down, something I think that they should do, because the best situation for that team is to get lottery luck in this draft. In a very deep draft like this, they should be prioritizing that, especially when they already have questions on Giannis's, commitment to this team in the future and if he's going to ask for a trade, right? And so, the Milwaukee Bucks, for what it's worth, they tried. They kept doing things to try to build another championship roster around Giannis, because to Giannis's credit as well, he's been very consistent in saying, listen, as long as I feel like I have the best chance to win a championship here in Milwaukee, that's where I'm going to be, right? But apparently this comes from ESPN as well, as that Antetokounmpo privately told the organization for months leading into the February 5th trade deadline that he was ready to be moved. He stopped short of issuing a formal public trade demand, but made his position unambiguous to all parties involved. He believed both sides needed to separate immediately as a franchise lacked the foundation to compete. Going on to say this, Giannis has wanted to handle this professionally by being very upfront with the team. This could have been a happy situation, but instead might end up being a nasty breakup. Those are big words to say that this could end up being a nasty breakup. We also heard over the last 24 hours that the Miami Heat made the best offer. They built an offer around Tyler Hero, Khalil Ware, and multiple draft picks before the ownership of the Miami Heat actually pulled out of those trade talks on February 4th. Now, could those be revisited? Sure. But I think at this point now, especially with this getting out, and it could be being linked by Giannis or whatever, that this situation has now reached the toxicity levels that it has, that it's going to be very hard to get the trade value that was once offered. We've seen that, right? According to the team source, they also say this: when your best player has 1 foot in, 1 foot out, you're not going to win. We've seen Bobby Portis mention it. We've seen other people mention it, right? And reportedly as well, something that came out yesterday is that Giannis and his agent met directly with the Milwaukee Bucks ownership late in January to discuss a handshake agreement tied to his 2020 and 2023 contract extensions. The two sides have previously agreed that ownership will facilitate a collaborative trade should the time come, according to multiple league sources. So it seems like putting all this together is that what's happening here is that that Giannis and his agent kind of feel betrayed, that they went in good faith to talk to the front office and say, hey, this is what we want. This is what Giannis feels. We feel like it's best to go ahead and amicably part ways so that we can move on. It's best for both parties. I don't feel like we can compete here. And the Milwaukee Bucks looked at it in bulk and tried to convince him to stay. Now, I get it to a degree, right? Giannis is the best thing that happened in that franchise's history. And I understand them wanting to try to give a runway to prove, hey, Giannis, no, we can still put something around you here. But the writing was, everybody saw it, but apparently the Milwaukee Bucks. There was just not going to be the runway to be able to put a competing team around Giannis in the time constraints that you have. And so now with the extension not happening, and that's not going to be something that happens, it seems like it's going to be, he's going to have to be moved. And, for the Milwaukee Bucks credit, they've already set themselves up to be a lottery. They're going to be in the lottery this year, which in this deep draft, even if their pick does stay at number 10, where it's slated to be right now, they still can have a bevy of young talent to get to help with that. If you do end up trading with the Miami Heat as well, and let's say you get Tyler Hero back in that trade or whatever, Khalil Ware back, you get another young piece in Khalil Ware that you compare with that. Maybe draft a guard. So the Milwaukee Bucks are always going to have to draft their best players. That's just the reality of it. Even with Giannis, even at his height, they've never really been a free agent destination. This has not been what the Milwaukee Bucks organization has had. So there's no reason to really believe that that's going to change right now either. So it just seems like at this point now, it's time to move on. And the question really just becomes about how hard are the Milwaukee Bucks going to fight this off, or what are they even going to get back now? Because as we've seen around the NBA multiple times, once teams realize that you're at your point where you have to trade a player, especially if the situation is growing toxic, those deals, those offers really don't turn and amount into much. But we shall see, right? But we're not kind of done talking about the Milwaukee Bucks yet. The Chicago Bulls were the first franchise to make their big shift in their offseason yesterday when they decided to fire their front office, Arturas Karnisovas and Mark Eversley, their president of basketball ops and their GM. This was before the speculation that their head coach, Billy Donovan, could go to UNC. That job ends up going to Mike Malone, the former Denver Nuggets coach. And so now the Bulls are apparently making a press to try to keep Billy Donovan here, but it's still going to be up to Billy Donovan at the end of the season. But let's use that to talk about front office or teams that are looking for front office changes and head coaching changes heading into this offseason. Number one, outside of the Chicago Bulls situation, which, despite if it wasn't for ownership, probably would be a more promising situation with all the draft picks that they have. They have all their own draft picks. They have tons of cap flexibility this offseason and a roster where you only got 6 players on the roster, or 9 players on the roster, out of this season. And some of those guys you can even move off of, right? But you also have the Dallas Mavericks and them in their search for a new president, GM, and those type of things to move forward that franchise. Reportedly, they could be offered. They're interested in Bob Myers, Masai Ujiri, and players like that, and people like that as well to come in and guide this franchise into the next phase in the Cooper Flag era, right? So that's what you have here. Is you have those front offices that are really looking for that. Reportedly, there could be some other ones. The Brooklyn Nets also are a team that also is looking for a new front office leadership as well. And so now it's going to be interesting to see between Bob Myers, whose name's there. People have mentioned Sam Presti. I don't see, but really Bob Myers and Ujiri are probably the biggest guys that are out there that we know that are available, right? And which of those two teams lands one of those guys, and which has to pivot to maybe an assistant that's coming from a winning franchise or something like that. So those are the questions that are there and that exist for those teams who are trying to figure it out. As it stands right now, it really just seems like the Dallas Mavericks probably are the most promising job. The Brooklyn Nets, with all the draft picks they have, all the young players, and all the moldability that they have on that roster to try to mold it into what they want to be, we'll end up seeing. But the bigger story, of course, is the coaching carousel. Right now, we'll see what happens with the front office moves, what the Mavericks do, what the Nets do, what the Chicago Bulls do, and what other team pops up with that. But there are a number of coaching situations that are popping up when you look at it. Billy Donovan potentially leaving the Bulls. His choice could be that he's choosing to walk away. But then also you have the Bucks, the Magic, the Blazers that are all sitting there, right? With probably coaching changes happening. Doc Rivers seems like he's on his way out, especially after they trade Giannis. One of the reasons that Doc Rivers stayed and was on is because reportedly the relationship between him and Giannis was so good that they wanted to work through that. Right now, it seems like that's moving on. Unfortunately, with the Orlando Magic, Fernandez isn't necessarily the problem there, but I do think that they have to make a change. And either they're going to overhaul the roster or they're going to change the head coach. Usually, when you get to that point, the head coach is the one that changes. Then the Blazers situation. Tiago Splitter is still the interim head coach. And technically, Chauncey Billups is still the actual head coach. That's going to change this offseason. But it seems like the Blazers have not yet committed to Tiago Splitter being their head coach of the future. So with that, you have coaches like Taylor Jenkins. Mike Malone's now gone, right? You have Taylor Jenkins out there. You have other guys that you can bring up. Chris Quinn, one of the most heralded assistants. Sam Cassell out there. As the NBA coaching carousel really starts and really gets ramped up, it's going to be interesting to see where these names end up falling and where they end up going, because that says a lot, I think, about how the jobs are viewed, right? And that's the thing that you have to look at with all of this, is that this is already a free agency, which we'll get into here in a second, that isn't a lot of marquee free agents, but executives and coaches. There are a lot of really good executives and coaches that are out there that absolutely can help turn teams around almost immediately. And the question becomes about where do those coaches go? If Billy Donovan kicks off that coaching carousel, cool. It could end up being a guy like Doc Rivers as well, who's probably on his way out there as well. So we'll see what happens in that one. And overall, I just think that you're going to see a number of coaches. The Milwaukee Bucks situation, the Orlando Magic situation, all those situations are going to pop up. Jamal Mosley with the Orlando Magic, he's probably on his way up out of it. I think I said Jordy Fernandez earlier. It's Jamal Mosley. He's going to be on his way out of there. And the other teams are going into a whole reset. Even the Dallas Mavericks could be a team also looking for a new head coach, as Jason Kidd reportedly wants to be in a front office. He wants to have a front office role, and all he ever knows is power moves. So Chicago, Portland, Milwaukee, Orlando, these and possibly Dallas are going to be some of the biggest, or the teams possibly looking for new head coaches heading into the offseason of 2026. Let me know which one of those positions do you think is best, and the best position for a coach to fill into, which is the most promising position. Let me know that down below. But we also got to talk about free agency, because NBA free agency this season could get very interesting, and it could get interesting because of LeBron James. So while we're discussing this and free agency and the LeBron James of it all and stuff like that, most of what was projected to be in the free agency of 2026 in the summer already happened to sign extensions. You look at Trae Young, Anthony Davis, Jaren Jackson Jr., all those guys are no longer part of the free agency of the summer of 2026. Those are some of the biggest names that were possibly in that market. And now Trae and Anthony Davis are with the Wizards. Utah Jazz got Jaren Jackson Jr. And so now that's not necessarily as much free agent. You even look at the Atlanta Hawks now, who added CJ McCollum in that Trae Young trade, and now they had a few months to really look at him and see what they're going to do with this $30 million expiring salary, before he becomes an expiring free agent and stuff like that. So, maybe teams are interested in pursuing him. But you look at it right now, the free agency of 2026 is not going to be groundbreaking, right? You have Zach LaVine, who's already said he's opting into his $49 million player option to stay with the Sacramento Kings. James Harden, he's not leaving his current situation with the Cleveland Cavaliers either. Andrew Wiggins is probably going to opt into his $30 million player option also. And so look at KCP, Fred VanVleet, both these guys having over $20 million options. They're probably going to opt into it. So now you're looking at the free agency of summer of 2026, and the biggest names on the board potentially are LeBron James, who's probably leaving the Lakers, Draymond Green, who's probably staying put with the Golden State Warriors, Kristaps Porzingis, who reportedly they want to keep there as well, Austin Reeves, who is going to opt out but re-sign with them, Norman Powell. So you're looking at a free agency where Norman Powell could realistically be the biggest free agent not named LeBron James in the free agency of 2026. Kristaps, with his rare illness that he has that affects him and stuff like that, we'll see what happens in that moment. So the biggest storyline of free agency is probably going to be where LeBron James ends up going. We've heard rumors of anywhere between him going back to Cleveland, him going with Steph and Dre over with the Golden State Warriors, right? Those type of things are there. So as we talked about at the beginning of the show, it's really going to be trades that really make this offseason. Of course, you have restricted free agents like Peyton Watson, Walker Kessler, Mark Williams. You do have a guy that the team could opt out of his contract, like Isaiah Hartenstein as well, that could open up some things when it comes down to that. But, this is not going to be the biggest, most maneuverable free agency possible. And so because of that, right, you're looking at trades really being a big thing in this year's free agency. And it seems like that's the consensus around it. And, we'll see what ends up happening with that one, right? But you look at, players that could be flipped, Tari Eason, Peyton Watson, those, as far as free agent targets for the Lakers, stuff like that. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see how teams really improve this season. And between a deep draft, a lack of really unrestricted free agents, some restricted free agents as well, you could see a lot of sign and trades outright in this offseason. But I want to hear from you guys on this one. When you look at the free agency of the summer of 2026, how do you feel? And do you agree that LeBron James and that decision that he makes could be the biggest story of any free agent this offseason? Let me know what you guys think about that down below. If you think this offseason is going to be crazy, I want to hear from you guys down below. What do you think is the craziest thing that happened? What do you think happens with the Giannis situation as well? Potential front office moves. Let me know that down below. Make sure you guys are following us. Well, like the video, subscribe to the channel. You can follow us at NBA Central Pod. You send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, NBA Central Show at gmail.com. And then lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the #1 spot for everything basketball related. I'll catch you guys the next time I feel like making a video. Probably tomorrow. Peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Breaks Media.